We are live now. You're not time for you, Colin. Sorry.
Is it SNYDER?
Five, right? Am I got that right? Four minutes before we start, so.
Got some house plans, got a driveway. Well, I mean, I just got my house plans back this week.
You just keep living in your old house.
I got you. He'll blink wherever second base. Yes, except for Tony Gwynn. I could never strike that guy out. You know, like, yeah, he was like, he has this whole, and you're just like amazed by everything he's saying. The fact that he even thought that way, right? And then he goes, except for Tony Gwynn, I could never strike him out.
Not till the other night.
I've ever sat on the stadium was at a lacrosse game because there weren't but 200 people.
Yeah. Got 1 minute.
Hey, yeah.
Because you don't know.
And I should say, he didn't
That's what does it.
Yeah.
added him out. He was, Chris would never tell me that his mother was happy to rap.
Grandparents. Grandmother, I thought she was gonna get up and run on the field a couple of times.
All right, I've got 5:45, so we will go ahead and call the meeting to order. If everyone would stand for the moment of silence, and then we'll have the pledge. Has a guest with us tonight, Mr. Colin Snyder from Boy Scout Troop 444 is going to stand with Mr. Burnett and lead us with the pledge. Is that okay? 455, sorry. Flag of the United States of America, the republic for which it stands, a nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Great job.
Item Recorder, if you call the roll.
Chairman Floyd,
Present.
Vice Chair Harrison,
Present.
Deborah Thomas,
Present.
Jeremy Burnett,
Here.
Michelle Childs,
Here.
and Superintendent Horrell.
Here.
We do have a quorum. I'd like to welcome everyone to our March business meeting. It's our only meeting this month. Dr. Horrell, would you like to lead us through our agenda?
I would. The first item on the agenda is the opportunity for public comment.
Would anyone from the public like to speak? Hearing none. Next item.
Next item is our report section, starting with a TLN representative update. Ms. Childs, I know is ill and is nursing a cold.
Yes, bear with my cold and my terrible voice. First, I'll mention that there's been a proposal for an overhaul in education funding, but I'm going to let Dr. Horrell talk about that in the superintendent report. So there's a lot of education bills going through, so I'm just going to highlight a few. First, HB 2833, SB 2168 by White and Stevens has considerable concessions for charter schools. This is a bill that TSBA opposes. HB 2460, SB 2332 by Rudder and Hensley. This is supported by TSBA and would require TCAP individual test results to be given to schools within 10 days of the testing. Testing has to be done before 20 days before the end of the school year, so you would have the test results before the school year is over. HB 2215, SB 2265 by Ramsey and Nicely. I thought I'd mention this because it comes up later today about dismissal process and the hearing officers. This particular piece of legislation would cause the dismissal process to be the same for non-licensed employees as it is for licensed employees. TSBA opposes this one. 2345, SB 2250 by Carringer and Lundberg would allow non-resident students to enroll in a school in which spaces are available. HB 751, SB 1158 by Moody and Hale would provide vouchers for students with dyslexia. HB 1077, SB 1225 by Leatherwood and Rose adds an exception for third grade students to be promoted based on the school district data that demonstrates an understanding of ELA. This is supported by TSBA. And I will also mention there was a bill, HB 2085, SB 2036 by White and Sutherland that would have allowed LEAs to create their own open enrollment policy, and that failed.
Questions on the TLN report? Mrs. Harrison.
Is there, so the TCAP results within 10 days, is that, what is the
Or the
recourse,
teeth.
right, what is the teeth there, is it just?
I can research that. I don't know, but I remember when we were at SBA convention and a question was asked about, well, if that can be done then, why not now? And they basically alluded to it's not part of the contract, and that whoever, you know, if this becomes law, it would have to be part of what the vendor agrees to do, knowing on the front hand, because I believe it was said you get the overall scores that time now, but just not all of the individualized, currently.
The human scored components, that takes time. So the computer scored items, that's a pretty quick turnaround, but anything that requires human scoring, that's a longer deal.
Yes, this was, actually more than one school, including Arlington Community Schools and Germantown Municipal School District, proposed, for TSBA to support, and it got wide support among school boards, and we support it, and we had asked our legislatures when we were in Nashville to support it, and I mean, already 2 of them are carrying the bill. So we're hopeful that it will pass, so that, you know, if there is data that demonstrates students do understand literacy at the 3rd grade level, that they won't be held back for the test that doesn't measure it.
We did work fairly closely with Germantown and with our legislators to get that language hammered out, actually. So that's one that certainly we support and have been involved with.
So we feel like the language addresses what our
Matter of it actually becoming law or not.
and the wording not getting changed.
Yeah, and then
So when I asked Representative White about that, he said that had already been amended at the time that we met with him, that particular piece about them being able to bypass the LEA from the get-go. So my understanding is that the the application for the charter would still initially go through the LEA, but yes, at some point it would go through this new charter school commission that was created by the governor last year. Also establishes additional funds for charter schools, and I'll also mention that the new proposed funding has extra money for charter schools as well.
What was the one after HB 2215 that had to do with,
HB 2345, SB 2250 by Carringer and Lundberg. It will allow non-resident students to enroll in an LEA if spaces are available.
90% is actually the optimal operation of a school building. So does it define?
My understanding is the LEA would determine that, but
this is not a new one, right? This is the same one we discussed where
I think so, but
I
There's
believe
been
this one
several
doesn't
of-
apply to us all, because we
okay.
don't have multiple schools within our LEA in the same grade band, unless this one has
Well, this
popped up.
one's
this
for
one's
non-residents.
non-residents.
Not
We were
transfer within
talking-
the district, this
This
is
is open
outside the,
enrollment in it.
yeah.
Okay,
I think
with
we were-
Representative White about it. when
We
were
did.
there.
I think he said that we would be able to determine how many seats that was, because each LEA knows best how many it can serve. I mean, we haven't seen the language of the bill, so.
Or you let somebody in.
Well, because that was one of the things we discussed in Nashville was, you know, we're getting ready to have this building and we've made careful plans to take a grade at a time through there, and those should not be construed in any way as available seats, because we don't have the staffing, you know, to meet those needs.
Yes, we made it clear to all of the representatives that we met with that we oppose any legislation that takes away local control to determine enrollment.
Ms. Childs, for your diligence in the TL report, and we look forward to hearing from you. April, as session starts to come towards a close, typically around April, so we'll see, we'll have a better idea of where things stand at that point. Dr. Horrell, next item.
Definitely. Next item is the superintendent's report. I do have just a few things to share with you. Budget work is ongoing right now. Both Ms. Millspaw as HR and Ms. Rosales in particular are working hard on the budget. Ms. Rosales expects to have a first draft completed by early next week, and per our calendar, we'll present the budget to the board at the April work session and then meet with board members individually and submit for approval at the business meeting in April, just to review that timeline. There are a number of things, I wouldn't even be able to get into all of them, that are happening in preparation for the 9th grade opening next year, including a number of new hires for the school. This question gets asked, we have had a lot of interest for those high school positions, and I think have had a really good selection of candidates, and I know the administration is working hard to pick the best candidates, and they seem to be getting some good folks on board. So we're excited about that, because as we all know, that's really what makes the school. It's those people in the building, not the facilities, not really anything else, but the people that make those experiences good for the parents and for the kids. So we're excited about that. I did want to note something that's kind of been a little bit under the radar, and it's being finalized, but we have made some significant improvements to the drainage and erosion at the eastern playground, or the kindergarten playground at Lakeland Elementary School. That's something that has been on the radar for a long time. Basically just over time, there's the erosion causes mud to kind of get down on the playing area, and it makes it less optimal for the kids to play on. So we've got a nice new retaining wall there and some new drainage structures that are going in. So excited to have been able to do that at the elementary school. We talk a lot about what's going on at the middle school and the high school. So some improvements there at the elementary school. In terms of our COVID benchmarking that we try to do, I'm happy to report that we had our first what I'll call a 4-0 week of COVID cases last week. We always report and track the number of student cases and staff cases at the elementary school, and student cases and staff cases at the Lakeland Preparatory School. It was 0, 0, 0, 0 for the first time really since we returned to school. So that is an extremely promising and exciting development, certainly in our COVID benchmarking. As Ms. Childs noted, the funding formula, TISA, I think I'm saying that right, TISA or TISA, I think it's TISA, the Tennessee Investment in Student Achievement funding formula has been shared by the governor and is now being proposed as legislation, essentially, or will be soon if it hasn't already. And basically, the things that we knew were that this would be what they call a student-based funding formula as opposed to a ratio-based funding formula. The BEP, basically those numbers were determined by, for every, in some cases, 15 students you have, you get a certain amount of money, or for every, 25 of a different category, you get a certain amount of money. It was intended to be, it was allocated for certain things. This is a student-based funding formula where they have what's called a base that would go with every student in the district. So no matter who you are, if you are a student in a public school system, you would get X amount of dollars, and we found out that amount is $6,860. So that would be the base. That would be for every single student, and that's a different way to think about it. And then on top of the bases, they have ratios that would be added to the amount of money that student generates based on the number of categories that they fall into. And the most significant categories that they talk about are is the student from an economically disadvantaged background, They also, every student in the school gets additional funding allocated or a ratio if there's a concentration of poverty. They also give it, oh, Ms. Childs has it right here. I was looking at my notes, but hers are better. Concentration of poverty, look, I did those two right in a row. If you're in a sparse school district where the students are more spread out, we do not qualify for that one, by the way. They do have a category that was with some controversy that is a charter school student. If you're a charter school student, they propose giving additional dollars to you. And then there are a number of unique learning needs, and we would have students that fall into those. Those are basically, and that was only released recently, those are the special education categories, as well as students with dyslexia. Gifted falls in there somewhere. EL students fall in there as well in those categories. There's additional funding for K through 3 students. There's a $500 that you get. That's not a ratio. Most of the ratios are a percentage of the base on top. You get an additional $500 for every student in K through 3 to address early learning. And then there are some that are they call them outcomes based, where you get reimbursed, or you get, I'm sorry, not reimbursed, but you get additional funding for the number of students that take certain tests. If it's industry certification, the ACT, basically what they call post-secondary assessment here. So this like the BEP, is a funding formula, not a spending plan. And they do, and that has held. So we are glad to see that basically they just tell us how the funds are generated. They're not trying to tell us how to spend the funds. So it's up to the discretion of the school board, obviously, in the budget approval process to make those kind of determinations. There's a $9 billion is what they're saying for total education funding for 2024, $1 billion in new recurring funds, and $750 million in one-time state funds. The things we were mainly concerned about, first of all, is are we going to get more money or less money? Obviously, that's the main thing we'd be concerned about. Second would be which way of measuring fiscal capacity is being used. So right now, our fiscal capacity, which has to do with what the local match is based on all of Shelby County and not district to district. It would have been less advantageous to Lakeland school system if the state had proposed switching to use district fiscal capacity rather than county fiscal capacity. Under the plan right now, county fiscal capacity is used, so that is a good thing. And then the other thing that we wanted to we're hopeful of is that maintenance of effort would not be reduced. There was some concern that this would be an opportunity to kind of reset maintenance of effort, which would mean potentially that less local funding was required, and therefore possibly less local funding might be given. That does not appear to be the case either. So, this was published in the Tennessean and is available online, so I don't think there's any harm in sharing. But based on the analysis that was presented to us by the state, so this was the state's analysis, if they took what and by the way, this is for 2 years from now. So next year, the budget we're working on now will use the BEP formula. So BEP is 22-23. This would kick in if passed, and it has not passed, but if passed by the legislature, this would kick in 23-24. What the state is telling us is that at 23-24, if they use the numbers from 22-23, because it's funded a year behind, that TISA would generate $3.1 million additional dollars for Lakeland school system. So that includes both the state funding and the required local match. Assuming that everything we're being told about the required local match and how those funds are generated and the maintenance of effort, it would appear, I'll say this, where I am cautiously optimistic that this would be a benefit to Lakeland school system. We're still trying to peel back the onion a little bit and make sure we're not missing things. Most of those extra dollars would come from those ratios, the base. If you just take the base and compare it to the BEP, for us at least it seems to be kind of the same, and it's the ratios where you would get the additional funding, but again, the additional funding would be a good thing. So That's one of the things we're looking at. There's some more kind of vague language about fast-growing and infrastructure stipends that we're trying to get a handle on, but there does seem to be some kind of acknowledgement of that as well, and we would tend to be in one of those fast-growing categories. That is. Did you have anything else that was left out, Ms.
No,
Child?
you
She's been
covered
tracking
it.
this real carefully as well.
Thank you for doing that.
Absolutely.
Ted,
Please, yeah, any questions on that?
question
Hit the
on
mic,
that
make
one
sure you.
Oh, sorry, on
Yeah.
that one item. The economically disadvantaged students. My day job, I know how we identify students that way. We talk about students who qualify for free and reduced lunch. When we talk about economically disadvantaged students, how do we identify them?
That was one of the debates of the steering committee, and I believe that what they settled on is that it would be direct cert is what they call it, direct certification. So there are more students that qualify for free and reduced lunch than they are direct cert, like through a government organization. So I think they went with the smaller number, basically.
Session, whether this passes or not, and what form this passes in, but this is not.
Yes.
Okay.
And I will say that there has, I know I can vaguely say there's been some talk of having a summer session to talk about this. I know there's been at least some feedback. I won't speak for anybody that, the legislators would like some more time to take a look at it, and maybe they don't feel like they could make that decision in April, but it does have the full support of the governor. Obviously, it is possible that the session ends and no action has been taken and they have a summer study session with it.
So usually when it's a summer study, it comes back the next legislative session, or do they potentially?
I heard the term summer study, which is not the same as you noted as an extraordinary session, so that they might spend some time this summer.
So the summer study would be something that comes back the next, potentially the next regular
Yeah.
legislative cycle, so we would have less time to analyze.
Right.
If it doesn't,
And if they keep the dates the same, they might move the dates if they.
right,
But I will note, from our perspective, in terms of time to prepare, as long as it's more money,
right.
I mean, if they said, we're gonna do it right now, and you get more money than
Right.
you were budgeting, then we could prepare.
Right.
Yeah,
But just being able to delve into the.
yeah, absolutely, yes,
Make sure
yes.
there, like you said, there's not something we're missing, the
That's
aha
right.
gotcha moment.
That's right, yes, I agree with you.
Thomas.
So how will we be impacted since we're keeping more kids over the next 4 years, beginning in the fall?
We'll say we have had a conversation with the state Department of Education Finance Department about whether or not we might be able to be advanced, because again, typically we're funded on a lag.
Right?
We're behind, so next year we anticipate having, roughly 200 more students than we do this year, even though the BEP would reflect the enrollment for this year. So they may let us play ahead like that, but basically, you just take the base. I mean, it just depends on the number of students, and you multiply that base times the number of students, and you put the ratios on top of it and figure it out.
Continue on, Dr. Horrell, with your report.
With my report, thank you. I just wanted to note the students are taking their third and final case test this week, so this will be kind of that final piece of data, so the teachers will have access to that data when they get back from spring break to start kind of focusing on the standards that they feel like need the most emphasis. They're in the last 9 weeks. I wanted to make a note. I have noted previously that there were some that one of the areas that has been delayed in the high school project has been the completion of the track and field, specifically the resurfacing, which means that it's not able to be used by the 60-plus students that came out for middle school track and field. I wanted to note to everybody that I reached out, and Bartlett City Schools very, very graciously set aside 2 evenings per week for for our middle school coaches and students to use their track and field. They went last week and used it for the first time, and the coaches reported that in addition to being a beautiful facility, the staff went above and beyond to make sure that they were comfortable, that they knew where things were. They said any equipment you want to use is all yours. So we have traditionally had some great partnerships with the other school systems in Shelby County, and this is just another really, really nice example. So I wanted to express that gratitude. And then finally, I wanted to acknowledge why the school board members and I are dressed a little non-traditionally, I guess, for our board meetings. We are all wearing our Brave Like Brody t-shirts in honor of Brody Townsend, who is fighting through some health issues right now, and he is fighting, and he is brave, and he is strong, and he is working hard, and this is a reminder that we all need to be brave like Brody. And it's also got another Brody catchphrase in here that says, toughen up. I feel like Chairman Floyd would like that one even more than brave like Brody. But that's actually Brody talking to others, saying, toughen up. If I can work through this, you can too. So we are, Brody, if you're listening, and Brody's family and friends and schoolmates, we are here. We love you. We're thinking about you, and we absolutely support you, and are going to do our best to be brave like Brody. So thank you for the example you're setting for us. So,
We love you, Brody.
absolutely. And that concludes my report.
Any questions on the superintendent's report? None, we'll move to the next item.
Next item is the approval of the agenda.
Is there a motion to get this item on the floor?
I'll move.
We have a motion, is there a second?
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Are there any additions or changes to the agenda that anyone would like to make? Hearing none, all in favor of approving the agenda, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Agenda's approved. Next item.
Next item is the consent agenda. We have no items on the consent agenda, so we can move to the discussion items. The first discussion item is the approval of the minutes from the business meeting of February 7th, 2021.
Do we have a motion to get this item on the floor?
I'll move.
A motion, is there a second?
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Any discussion on this item? Hearing none. Oh, Ms. Millsbaugh. We'll make that typographical change. Without objection, any other discussion or comments on this item? Hearing none, all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Next item.
Next item is discussion action on update to policy 1.404, appeals to and appearances before the board.
Is there a motion to get this item on the floor?
I'll move.
We have a motion. Is there a second?
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Dr. Horrell.
Yes, we had a suggestion that I think we thought to be logical, that in this era of streaming, that it might not be necessary or advisable for those who wish to speak to the board to publicly on the live stream say their personal addresses when addressing the board. And so basically this policy comes up, and thank you to Mr. Plumley for working through this, but comes up with an approach where those who wish to speak would still fill out the card with their name and address and contact information, and then the chairman would have the opportunity to recognize recognize the speakers who are residents of Lakeland, because that can make a difference in terms of consideration. And it also addresses basically speakers being able to yield time, and sets a limit on a 6-minute limit. So the most that a speaker could speak on a topic would be 6 minutes if two other people in attendance wanted to yield their time. So I feel like this is a good update to procedure, and would recommend it to the board.
Thomas.
Question to consider. Recently we had a lot of speakers, and not all of them were Lakeland residents, and I wonder if it would be acceptable to ask for city of residence, that allow us to know if we're hearing from parents in the community, as opposed to people who may not have as much of a stake in things that we're doing involving our students. Just a question.
It does say that the chair may note which speakers are or are not residents of Lakeland. So
Okay.
presumably he would take a card and.
I understand it, and Dr. Horrell, correct me if I'm wrong, they would still complete the card as normal.
Right.
And it would get turned in to the chairman.
Right.
Chairman recognizes the name, and at that point, would have the option of saying, Mr. So-and-so, a Lakeland resident.
Okay. I was looking at line 26, and so, then having the person announce city of residence, then we're handling it this way, right?
That's the proposal. I think either way would be,
Okay.
would be fine.
Okay, I'm fine with
So,
that.
so I have a question regarding that. So, or the only concern that I have is it's optional to know which ones are Lakeland residents, where I feel like the rest of the board potentially is not. Like to propose that we chair will note change the, or the chair will note which
Just say
beacons.
shall, change may to shall.
Yeah.
Ms. Harrison has made a motion to amend the policy.
Second.
We have a second. We're talking about the amendment. Any discussion on the amendment? All in favor of approving the amendment, say aye.
Aye.
Amendment passes. We're back on the main motion, which is the discussion on the policy. Any further discussion on the policy? Childs.
I just wouldn't, I support this because, you know, these videos may be around for a long time. I think as long as they just put the address and their states, a Lakeland resident, or however it is, if you state that they're Lakeland. But as long as we know if a person's outside of the city limits, I think this is a good policy.
When someone speaks, do we note in the minutes their address?
We note their name, their address block, and then their street address. So
That's fine, I was just making sure that for, if it ever is recorded, because we're not saying it on a recording, that we have minutes, knowledge, what the, at least the street or whatever of residency.
Good. Any further discussion on this item? Hearing none, all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion passes. Next item.
Next item is discussion action on update to policy 4.600 grading system.
Is there a motion to get this item on the floor?
I'll move.
We have a motion. Is there a second?
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Dr. Horrell, would you like to speak to this?
Yes, this is a fairly substantial update to this policy because it includes a lot of language that relates to high school students and how high school GPAs are calculated for various purposes. I want to thank Ms. Decker and Ms. Martin for working through this at the high school primarily, and they did consider and compare and review a lot of comparable policies. But basically, what I asked them to do is submit the ones that they felt like were most appropriate for Lakeland, based on their experience. Ms. Decker has quite a bit of high school experience, particularly. But there are a number of things in here. These are all things that certainly could be updated, you know, even as we get closer, as the years go on. But I think this is a really, really strong start, and to me is consistent with my understanding of what are the best policies for grading for high school.
Any discussion on this item? Ms. Thomas?
Just for clarity, we use the words term and quarter interchangeably. Just for clarity, it would probably make more sense to clarify that term is quarter. So there's one on page 4 in the second paragraph in the yellow. There's another one, 2 lines down in that same paragraph. You know, sometimes people use the word term and it's a semester. I think we should clarify that we're talking about quarters. Quarter instead of term.
Is there any objection to that change from Ms. Thomas? It seems graphical almost to me, clerical. Hearing no objection.
Administratively? Yep.
There's one more on page 7 if you want to.
We'll do a search and replace as appropriate.
Okay.
Ms. Childs?
I do have a question about the policy that if a student takes an AP class or a national industry certification course and the student does not sit for the exam, that they would have the weighting points removed. So I just want to get more information on that because, and why, I guess why you like that policy. I mean, obviously you want the students taking it. I guess I assume they, at the beginning of the year before they start the class, so they've already paid for it. And it would be the same amount of work they're doing. So I just wanted to ask more about that and if that's like what other munis are doing around here.
I don't know that it's 100% consistent, but it is very common to have some
Okay.
basically teeth in that. I think in particular for supporting the teachers, there is a tremendous amount of rigor, obviously, in the classes that's geared toward taking the test. And I think the fear is that, or the concern is that if students aren't motivated by that, that they may not be as engaged in the class. Ms. Harrison?
I have a question. So let's say the student, I mean, are there multiple dates in which these AP or national certification exams are offered, or is it just a one shot and done because there is a sickness issue? Like and this policy doesn't allow for any flexibility if ever their situation is, it's written it's shall not, or it, if they don't sit, it doesn't say if, that we're not gonna penalize you. So the way it's written, it doesn't allow any flexibility as far as that's concerned for extenuating circumstances.
I know there are makeup days. I don't know what would, happen with an extended hospital stay or, for example. I would assume we'd take that on a case by case.
And I'm just, would it be possible to put some language in there to say there's some authority within the superintendent or the school administration on, if there are extenuating circumstances to be considered?
Absolutely, yeah, that would give us that flexibility.
Okay.
And I
so
will
just-
say we do intend to offer an AP class in the 9th grade, so this
Right.
is one that we do have to figure out.
I'm not really good at wordsmithing that, but I would like to propose or make a motion that we do edit to allow some flexibility within the administration to not sit for that certain exam for.
How about extenuating circumstances, superintendent is authorized to make exception to this policy when there are extenuating circumstances. Well documented.
I mean, the only thing we're talking about waiving is the 5 points. Just takes them out of that, it takes them one weighted class away.
All the work and they're in the hospital. I don't feel like it's fair to not allow any flexibility at all for some extenuating circumstances. They can't take a test. All the other work for the class.
The issue that I have with that is that what is an extenuating circumstance?
Yeah, it does put pressure, I will say it puts pressure on the principal.
And it's very subjective. What you don't, and I think that the theory behind policy is that what you don't want is these kids signing up to get the weighted GPA and then not taking the test. The whole point of getting the weighted GPA is that this is a college level course, and the test shows what we've learned in this college level course. And if we don't take that, then correct.
So, but they're doing
But it's an
way
assessment.
harder, but I'm saying they're doing way harder work in theory than the students who are not taking honors or not. So, they're not gonna be, let's say 98, 99, if they're, let's say, a straight A student or whatever, then their grades may be like,
The test is what makes it the college course. Without the test, not a college course, because you can't get credit.
for taking the class. You don't get it's not a dual enrollment. It's an AP, so the only way you get college credit is taking the test, but there may be extenuating circumstances where they can't take that AP test, then we don't allow for that.
Mr. Burnett?
And my counterpoint to that is, I'm in higher ed already. Students take courses that are designed to prepare them for national certifications. Funding now to do boot camps and support students just specifically for CompTIA, who are college students who are going to work in this realm and are not taking the exam. I like well-documented. Don't put it in there and then allow for an appeal if there is an extreme case. In cases, once you have that certification, I'm all in for the college credit, but that certification leads a student to a job. Think about that realm when we think about they're compared to somebody else who doesn't have that certification, they're the one who's gonna get that job or get that additional bump in pay. So I like having teeth that this does. Almost ambivalent about having an exception, as long as the exception said really well. Maybe even gave some guidance around what that means.
Maybe the idea of an appeal is a good idea. I don't really know what that would look like, but, and I don't know the makeup policy either on these tests. Dr. Horrell, I mean,
I know there are makeup dates, but I don't know, I mean, depending on what the,
right, I mean, is it a week later or
Situation
is
was,
it
yeah.
60 days later? You don't get these scores until
After
summer.
they
Or
graduate,
until you're at an
yeah.
issue where
Could be wrong, but it's been a while since, maybe a
Oh,
year. It seems like you get the scores over the summer sometime.
it's
Yeah.
typically in July is when
Yeah.
I remember getting them. And it's after graduation. A lot
Yeah.
of seniors take AP classes, obviously.
Can you check into the makeup policy and then and bring this back?
I have no objection to approving it as it is, as long as we're finding out more information about makeup policy, deciding whether an appeal process or an exception process would be best, avenue to go
And,
down.
and I don't think anybody disagrees, Ms. Harris, that if a child's in a situation where they just flat out can't take the test, I want to penalize somebody, but we also, for me, I'd like for it to be as little, to make it as, not as subjective as possible. That's not the right way to say that, but
Is objective.
it may be as objective as possible is maybe the better way to say it. Because then you just get into what is the next.
When we're talking about the weighted number and the quality points, right? We're talking about both. Not be awarded the quality points or weighting points. So that means not the weighted GPA and not the 4 or 5 additional points added on the average, correct? They're both
Correct.
there.
Yeah.
Okay.
Which, that seems like, I understand the GPA, but the quality points, the 5 points,
Yeah,
the
that-
work, that is, I mean, that seems really,
What I was, the quality points are more a reflection of in the classroom. That's the classroom work. So they seem more tied to the 180 days in the classroom, whereas the weighted points, that would be the, and that's what kind of makes that stick.
This too as part of the bringing it back, but there is state accountability for EPSOs, those post-secondary opportunities. If you don't take the exam, I don't believe it counts as an EPSO,
Okay,
because it's not a post-secondary opportunity at that time. It's just
Right.
it's just a hard class you
Right.
took.
And that's kind of what my
Yeah.
point about AP is.
Yeah.
The test is what makes it
Right.
an AP course.
honors courses shall have 3 points added to the numerical grade, that's at the top of page. We go down and have the chart, so is that like a double saying it?
So
Or is-
top of page
Where are you?
4.
Top of page 4, it says honors courses shall have 3 points added to each quarter numerical grade and each semester exam grade, 2 grade semester, where it talks about adding the 3 points. But then we go down to the chart and we talk about the 3 points, 4 points, 5 points added. So I was just wondering if that's like a dual reference, like we're doing it in 2 different places and it's addressed in 2 different places, or is there a need to address it in the 2 different?
This time it's talking about how to calculate the average when you're incorporating state standardized assessment or semester exam. And the further down, the category is grading systems.
Actually, I fell into this, and some of it has to do, I think, with formatting. Right, at the top of page 4, we're still talking about middle school. And the grading system for grades 9 through 12 is the next section, which has the charts. Did that in an
Maybe
earlier
it's
review.
the heading, maybe.
There's grading procedures for grades 6 through 8, and that's on page,
I think we've got the lower the regular title case there
right,
below that because we've got the 2.
right.
Heading, and then it goes into, and that's fine, I was just trying to understand why it was listed twice, and then it says state standardized assessment and semester exam.
It seems
All
like a big
caps.
bold category. I agree.
Yeah,
I think
so I was just trying
formatting
to follow exactly, cause it's a lot, I guess I need to, I'm better if I print them out. So I really should print them out, it's just, it was 8 pages.
we can look at the formatting, and I think we can clean that up. Yeah.
There comments or discussion? Are we comfortable voting on this, or are we gonna bring it back in April? I mean, nothing's gonna change until, Dr. Horl, go ahead.
Well, I would think, really, either way is fine. Might be reassuring to have something on the books for most of this stuff, just because I will say we do get questions sometimes about these things, and we could at least answer with what has been approved, and if we make the change to the
Are you
I have
comfortable?
No issue doing it, I would just like to make sure it's added to our April agenda for that section, so we can get some clarification.
Yeah, we can do both,
Okay.
for sure.
Any further discussion? As I understand it, we're going to vote on this item tonight, but also list it on our April agenda. Make sure we've got it the way we want it.
Yes.
So all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion passes. Next item.
This item is discussion action on approval of policy 4.606, graduation activities.
Our motion to get this item on the floor.
I'll move.
We have a motion. Is there a second?
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Dr. Horl?
So this was the second reading for this. We did have some recommendations that came up in discussion last month, and those have been made to the policy that's online. We talked about participation in graduation activities being subject to the conditions in this policy, and also added that other honors or achievements may be recognized at commencement at the discretion of the principal.
Ms. Harrison?
So I do have a question. I was reading it and I was trying to understand. It says a student's behavior must be acceptable to the principal in order to participate in the school graduation ceremony. So the parent, and I will be a parent reading that, what defines acceptable? Is that like per our discipline policy? Like, is there certain things that they can, is that defined as the principal? I just wanna.
I can tell you from being a principal, is intentionally vague, and it is right up to and including the graduation rehearsal. It also includes the period before the students walk. The kind of the idea is we're going to have a nice graduation, and in fact, I've found that students are more motivated than possibly they've ever been in their lives to be acceptable.
further comments or discussion?
Does suspension mean ISS, OSS, or both? Students who are under suspension.
Typically OSS,
Okay.
because can't
By
be an
that time.
ISS if, you know,
And they're
Just
gone
that.
by that time
That's right.
typically, right?
I mean, you can't be
Seniors.
an ISS after you're out of
Right,
school, so. yeah.
Right.
Other comments or discussion? None, all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion passes. Next item.
Next item is discussion action on update to policy 6.312, use of personal communication devices and electronic devices.
Is there a motion to get this item on the floor?
I'll move.
We have a motion. Is there a second?
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Dr. Horrell?
Yeah, this is an update to this policy that actually comes at the request of Principal Martin and her staff. This has been vetted by the LEAD team, which is the teacher leadership team at Lakeland Preparatory School. In particular, it does make a number of changes. The existing policy basically said that students were not allowed to have these on their person. It does update to acknowledge that students have cell phone devices, but talks about what and when the use of those devices is acceptable.
Any discussion on this item? Hearing none, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion passes. Next item.
Next item is discussion action on approval of policy 6.702, student clubs, activities, and organizations.
Is there a motion to get this item on the floor?
So moved.
We have a motion. Is there a second?
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Dr. Horrell?
This is the second reading of this item. We did make a couple of changes that are highlighted in blue there. What's the name of that color? We said identify instead of recruit, to volunteer without additional compensation were the changes.
Any discussion on this item? Hearing none, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion passes. Next item.
Next item is discussion action on contract with Renaissance Group for architectural services regarding renovation of Old Brownsville property.
Our motion to get this item on the floor.
I'll move.
We have a motion. Is there a second?
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Dr. Horrell?
Yes, I will speak to this. As the board knows, we bought some property that includes a house that we would like to utilize for at least some central offices or central district offices. And just to be clear, this does not contemplate a full kind of central office the way we would think of it. This would be a renovation of a home to allow us to use it for that purpose, with the really emphasis being on getting the district employees that are here at City Hall into that space. I don't have the actual contract here, but there's a specific reason for that, and it's because of some conversation that was had. Renaissance Group would like to donate this architectural service to Lakeland School System, so basically do it under, we will have an AIA contract that was sent to me just before the meeting. As always, I'll have Mr. Plumley review that, but it'll be in consideration of $10, I believe, is what the contract will say. We have partnered with Renaissance for some time, and they said both them and their engineers agreed that that's how they would like to proceed on this job. So I didn't think there would be much objection, and I'm not even sure a vote's required, but I did want to share that.
That is awesome.
Vote to accept the donation. I don't know. I'm just curious.
I don't
Do we
believe
have a
so.
vote?
We'll still have to approve the
Okay.
contract.
Okay.
So at that point, executive committee, I think.
Oh, the
don't we?
executive, yeah, we'll sign the
So-
contract.
So typically, the board would authorize the executive committee to sign the contract.
That's what we ought to do,
Yeah, so we'll.
because
when-
they're ready to go.
Okay, and then we'll do that at our April meeting.
Oh,
So we
no,
need to
we'd
vote.
like to, I really hope to get a vote on the contract tonight. He told me a couple of days ago it was gonna be a no-fee contract, and I asked for the AIA. So I think what you said, if the board,
Has Mr. Plumley reviewed the contract yet?
I got it at 5:40. I mean, that's what I was
5:40.
trying to.
So,
It is a no-fee contract, however, I'll say. I typically, through a certain threshold, they don't even come before the board, but,
say that the executive committee, the motion could be the executive committee is authorized to execute the contract pursuant to there being no objections from our attorney, Mr. Plumley. In a second, any discussion on that?
One item. could we possibly invite someone from Renaissance to next meeting where we could thank them in person and formally in a public setting?
Dr. Horrell is
Sure.
nodding vigorously, so I think we can do
Yes,
that.
absolutely. I'm sure they'd be delighted to come.
So we still have a motion that we have to vote on. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion passes. Mr. Plumlee, the board will be waiting to hear from your approval, and then Dr. Horrell and I can execute the contract at that point. Ms. Childs?
A chance know like what a potential timeline could be on. I mean, I know obviously they have to do their part, but I mean, any idea on when renovated and when y'all could anticipate using it?
All right, I will state what was shared with me, not indicate my agreement with the capacity to pull this off. They said they thought that with the scope of the renovation we're talking about, that it could be done before the start of the next school year. I would think break next year might be more of a hard.
In the middle of the school year.
Yeah, absolutely, yes. I mean, so it's not a,
Right, right.
Dr. Mitchell and I always talk about
Right.
with the school, we say, this isn't a McDonald's. There's the deadline
Right,
here that
right,
we've
right.
got to be open. The kids are coming. So, yes,
Yeah,
that's absolutely
flexibility.
right. If
Yeah.
it were the first week, the second week, the 10th week.
Yeah.
Yep.
Any further discussion on this item? Hearing none, we'll move to the next item.
Next item is discussion action on update to the 21-22 annual agenda.
Was there a motion to get this item on the floor?
I'll move.
We have a motion. Is there a second?
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Dr. Horrell?
Yes, we have updated the annual agenda with several things that the board has discussed, including adding the selection of hearing officers to the December annual agenda, moving the disclosure of statement of interest from December, thank you, to January. The approval of the proposed school year calendar off of February. Nominating the TSBA Volunteer of the Year to March is the extent.
Any discussion on this item?
Did, and maybe I missed it, the proposed school year, is there a reason we took it off the February?
Already adopted, so we're,
Well, right, but I mean, I thought like we would do the tentative, I guess the proposed 2-year at this time.
I guess, so the official school calendar, it doesn't mean, it doesn't specify which one we do. We could do one for 30-30 if we wanted to.
these are reminders, I mean, that,
I guess I'm asking this is, we took that off, and I know that's not the adopted one, because that's in May, but I thought we would, I thought in February was when we do 2 years from now.
we have not been, I guess is part of it. We have not
okay.
had the census calendar typically by that time. We try to adjust the annual agenda to reflect.
Oh, you're saying all of it's just done in May now?
Tell me all of it. Tell me what you mean.
When we do 2 years from now calendar, like which month are we doing that?
Right now, the board has started doing 2 years out consistently.
Right.
So we're saying we would always do the calendar in May. And that if the next year's calendar has already been approved, then in May, we would be doing the next year's calendar. Yeah.
I mean, I know we share buses, so that's kind of, it's reliant on coordination. Is that why it typically works out, because we're talking with others? Since we do share buses and things like that, and we also share families, all those kinds of things.
These because I know Arlington's already putting out proposed calendar from 2 years from now.
Yes,
I
and we're
would-
involved in that conversation, yeah.
Okay, but I was thinking, okay, but maybe we don't.
I could look back and see when we've done it,
Well,
if
I
we
was just
wanted to have
thinking
it.
that was our final, not the,
Are you asking basically for board feedback? You're saying here's the proposed calendar and the board can give feedback to say, yeah, we do or we don't
No,
like it.
typically I've just brought the calendar and it's been
Yeah.
an agenda item. And what's happened
that's what I was
what's
asking
happened the
is-
last couple of years is we go over it as an administrative team, and one of the things we do at our meetings, go over the annual agenda. And every February, say, here's the calendar adoption.
Okay.
And I say, we don't have the calendar yet. We're still
Gotcha.
working on the calendar. So we're trying to move annual agenda date to something that's more reasonable. Now, if we had the calendar in April and Arlington had already approved it, then I'll bring it. But what we want to do is make sure we don't. That's what the annual agenda kind of
okay.
serves. Y'all want to put it on April, we could certainly put it on April, and if it's not ready by April, we'll just move it to May.
I'll just say, what's interesting is I have gotten questions about
In
Well, we were
22,
approved.
23,
yeah.
it's approved.
So we would be doing 2 years out.
Right.
Yes.
Okay, okay, as long
Yeah.
as we're staying on the 2 years out, I think.
We are absolutely,
okay.
this, changing it on the annual agenda does
Okay.
not change that approach to the calendar
Okay.
approval.
We're a year ahead.
yes.
Yes.
Okay, which I love.
22,
So-
well, you kind of suggested that. Michelle Childs suggested that from afar before she was on the board. Yeah,
So,
true story.
We had any other discussion on this item? Hearing none, we'll move to the next item. Did we vote on that?
Did we vote on it? I don't
no,
think
we
we did.
didn't.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion passes. Next item.
Next item is discussion action on nomination of TSBA Volunteer of the Year, Deborah Thomas.
Is there a motion to get this item on the floor?
I'll move.
We have a motion. Is there a second?
I'll second.
We have a motion in 2 seconds. Ms. Thomas, people would like to hear from you.
So a couple of years ago, before COVID, we, I guess, and some of you have been here a little longer, I guess we nominated our first community volunteer, our school volunteer to be the TSBA Volunteer of the Year. It required board action to vote on that person, and then all the paperwork had a deadline to be submitted by. So a couple years ago, we didn't really have a process in place. I just brought Stacy Cartwright's name before the board. We voted. I filled out the application. Ms. Millspaw got everything turned in, and she ended up winning the Volunteer of the Year award for the Delta District. So we have so many worthy volunteers in our community. We just didn't have a process yet, so I'll kind of let Dr. Horrell take over from here.
Yeah, what I'm proposing is just that we put this, as we did on the annual agenda, it's now on there now, and that this would be something that the board takes up in April. But that if the board members could just basically nominate people to me, just send an email directly to me of people you'd like to consider, we could probably come back with one recommendation to the board meeting. I can have conversations with you individually. What we don't want to do is name a bunch of people and then say, no, they're not the one. But if just over the course of the next several weeks, the board members wanted to nominate people to me, we can, I'm confident we can come up with a good candidate.
And I volunteer to write up the application and get it in. The deadline is May the 1st, so we will have to have our person named at the April business meeting. No, I looked at the deadline several times. I know a couple years ago, because we didn't know what the procedure was with TSBA, we already had a special called and we put it on the agenda for the special called. But now that we know, and now that it's gonna be on the March to-do list, we will never be surprised again.
March, or we submit names in March? We're going to vote it at our March meeting, or we're
No.
going to, so we'll
April
submit
meeting.
names?
Yeah.
Okay.
And so if we only have one meeting in March, which happens sometimes because we have spring break, which falls in March, then whatever meeting we have in March will, procedure, I think will be the same, where we all talk to Dr. Horrell, and then we come up with a name, and then in April, we make it official by voting.
So this agenda item will carry over to the,
Right.
Ms. Childs?
Ms. Thomas, can you send us a link for TSBA on what kind of criteria they look at so that we can have an idea of, you know, what they value, so that can kind of help us along the lines of who would be a good fit for the nomination?
Sure.
It's an electronic, it's an electronic form, right? And then we attached, I wrote a letter, and we attached the letter. Probably send you the letter, will help you, but I can definitely forward you the criteria right now.
Mr. Burnett?
And so, from a procedural perspective, what I think I heard Ms. Harrison say is that anticipate doing is in March, we would our names to Dr. Horrell, vote on it in April. Modify the annual agenda to say, in March, board members nominate TSB Volunteer of the Year, in April we vote.
we wouldn't actually nominate at the meeting though, correct?
Right, yeah.
It's just a placeholder, a reminder, I guess is what Mr. Burnett.
That's a reminder for me
To put it on
Tell
the
us.
agenda.
Okay.
to tell you to
Yeah.
nominate people.
Okay.
Of like it's like everybody needs to
Or
talk
a-
to Dr. Horrell and get your,
Evaluation stuff.
yes,
I will
yes.
tell you, the way if I were an outsider, other than not involved in this,
Call it TSB volunteer discussion or reminder or
I'm just saying
placeholder.
on
Yeah, we,
the-
that's fine. We do want you to nominate in March, so we can be ready for the April meeting. You're just not at the meeting. But.
Yeah, I don't
We
think
can put
anybody-
it however you want. My concern would be that if we put it on the April, we might not catch it
Yeah.
until right before the meeting.
Yeah.
So it's just,
So that we don't have this conversation next year, oh, wait, we gotta get these in so that we can nominate at the March meeting.
Well, and then when Stacy won, it was during COVID at the fall district meeting where she was supposed to be recognized. And of course, we didn't have the fall district meeting, and it was done online. So, and then we recognized her here. We had pictures and everything here. So I just thought it would be, we have so many volunteers in our community, and we should be submitting one every single year. And I volunteer again to,
so I actually found your email that has your letter, and it's also got a link to the
okay,
criteria and information, so I'm just gonna forward that to the board if that's okay with you.
that'd be great.
Can I make a motion? I would like to move that we nominate Ms. Thomas as our TSBA Volunteer of the Year Coordinator.
I'll second.
That's a new title.
We
That
have
sounds
a
great.
motion and a second. Any discussion on this item? Hearing none, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion passes. Congratulations, Ms. Thomas.
Thank you very much.
Get
I do like to write a good letter, so I'm honored.
Normal stipend of our board
Yes.
positions, right?
Thank you. Thank you very much.
You can double that.
All right.
Dr. Horrell, next item.
Okay, next item. Put that over here. This item is discussion action on update to 21-22 fees list.
Is there a motion to get this item on the floor?
I'll move.
We have a motion. Is there a second?
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Dr. Horrell?
This updates the list to include a track and field fee not to exceed $250.
Any discussion on this item?
I just say it's awesome to look at this list and see how many activities we have in our schools. It's just, in such a short time.
I agree, it is. We're talking
There
lacrosse.
was a time when I'm not even sure this list existed. Certainly, when we were just elementary school, maybe the recorder fee
Yeah,
and the
maybe.
class
There
T-shirt.
are a couple on there.
I think there's a shirt, a t-shirt.
But I mean,
The class
the
shirt.
list gets bigger every year, and it's really, really exciting.
It's very exciting.
Point well taken, Ms.
Yeah,
Thomas.
Yeah.
definitely.
Any further discussion on this item? Hearing none, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion passes. Next item.
Next item, discussion action on FY 21-22 budget amendments.
Is there a motion to get this item on the floor?
I'll move.
We have a motion. Is there a second?
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Dr. Horrell.
Yes, this is the amendment brought forth that was discussed at a previous board meeting in terms of our contribution to the OPEB GASB Trust to support our post-employment benefits for retirees.
Any discussion on this item? Hearing none, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion passes. Next item.
Next item is discussion action on update to list of qualified hearing officers per policy 5.200.
Is there a motion to get this item on the floor?
I'll move.
We have a motion. Is there a second?
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Dr. Horrell.
It was correctly noted that we needed to refresh our list of hearing officers at a previous meeting. And I want to thank Eric Plumley for finding the recommended list of hearing officers from TSBA. And he has reached out and contacted these three individuals, Tom Miner, Deborah Owen, Sam Jackson, who all appear to be qualified and are willing. Their biographies can be found by following the link on the agenda, and we recommend them for approval.
Any discussion? Hearing none, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion passes. Next item.
Next item is the review of Policy Manual Section 5, the second half.
Is there a motion to get this item on the floor?
So moved.
We have a motion. Is there a second?
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Mr. Burnett, any comments on this item?
Just one or two notes. The simplest one was one typographical error that Dr. Horrell and I looked at. That should make an administrative correction on that on 01 grievance procedures. On 5.603 staff meetings, there's a reference to teachers' tenure laws, superscript with the TCA reference. Search that over this course of this month, likely bring back some recommended updates. The others that we talked about, generally about some consistency for reference to policy said that failure to follow this policy could result in disciplinary action. Policy talked about requirements but didn't. And so really sort of what I wanted to ask the board's thoughts on tonight was, you all think, is Ted not have policy that says that every time, part of the policy, and we just don't want to have it anywhere.
Is that taken directly as a result of board policy that then is translated into the?
Employees do sign off on something that says they. Correct, nor would I wish there to be, as I noted to Mr. Burnett. I mean, basically employees are expected to follow, I mean, they signed several things that said they are expected to follow state law, Lakeland school system policy, and procedures, yeah, thank you.
My point wasn't to say, as Dr. Rowland talked about that, not to say specific items, but consistent amongst the policies that should say it. One, we should say it in all, or we shouldn't say it in any, and leave it the fact that, this is a policy failure to follow any policy.
Following this policy in discipline up to and including termination. That's just the blanket statement. every policy that says you shall do, or you should do, or this is the way you do this. It's can result in discipline up to and including not following this procedure, policy, whatever, can result in discipline. Open to the administration, superintendent on what situation, so if we're gonna include language, I'd like to keep it that broad.
Let's see, is that what's,
If
Mr.
it
Burnett seemed to
says-
be saying, either put it in every single policy or remove it from the ones that seem to maybe arbitrarily include that. I wouldn't be in favor of adding it to every Lakeland school system policy as relates to personnel, because then I
So
think you
there's
get into, it almost suggests that if it's not included in there, then that's not the case, when that is always the case. I mean, the employees, you know, with the exceptions that are stated in federal law, I mean, work at under the discretion and supervision of the superintendent, who is hired by the school board. So I wouldn't want to suggest that if we didn't include some words in that policy, then they're not, you know, expected to adhere to it.
So do they sign? I mean, I guess so they sign saying they'll sign something that says all Lakeland school system
Yes.
policy and rules? Then,
Yes.
and it says if not, then you can be terminated or disciplined or whatever the
I don't know if
case
it has that in the language, but state law says that. I mean,
And I apologize for not following up, because Dr. Horl and I touched base on this morning. I read that over the weekend as I was looking at following up on things, and on the one policy that had it, and then when we were on the phone, I couldn't find the specific policy, so I'll send that to Dr. Horl. Look at, but I like the idea of let's not put it anywhere. It's professional practice. And someone doesn't come back later and go, but this policy says it and this one doesn't. And try to stand on that.
We remove it from, because it's specific, the one you're talking about is staff-student relations.
The staff-student relations does not have it. That was my notes on, should we add something.
And I want to be clear that we're not removing anything tonight, because there's nothing before the board at this point in time. Mr. Burnett's just pointed out that he has a concern or a question that he and Dr. Horrell are working through. If that progresses further, Dr. Horrell will bring that policy back to the board, and the board at that time will
But we
choose
know,
whether
we
or
know
not to
of at
amend
least
that
one.
language.
If I could get the direction from the board, what I think I hear you saying is that any policy that includes that language needs to be brought before the board to remove it.
A recommendation from the policy committee if,
Yeah, and I think Dr. Horl and I will work through that this month, as we've got the other one to bring back next month.
Okay.
But I wanted to bring it up so that you all just have some conversation about it tonight, so you saw it in the next month, you knew. So official recommendations for changes. Second half of 5 next month, as well as looking at.
Mr. Burnett. Dr. Horrell, next item.
No further business before the board that I can see.
Are there any announcements? Who wants to talk about the PTA auction? What did they raised, I don't have it in front of me, 86
I think it
and
was
change,
86.
86,000 and
I
change.
think that's what the number.
And that is a remarkable, and that doesn't just happen. There's a lot of work, a lot of energy, and a lot of time by a lot of people. And we are very, very fortunate to have those people that have that commitment and level of support for our school system. And we're very, very appreciative of the PTA and all those involved with it, including the sponsors, by the way, that stepped up in a big way. So big
No
thank you
doubt.
to everyone involved in that. That was an outstanding showing.
Unbelievable. Totally incredible.
LPS had its first lacrosse game last week, or match, I guess they're called matches. And I'd never seen that before. It was really cool to see, you know, kids out there who found a game they enjoyed and playing it for Lakeland. baseball starting tonight, JV. City starts tomorrow night. There's
Soccer last week won their
soccer
match.
last week,
Yeah.
won 9-1
Won
in their
big.
opening game. They won big.
Swimming is happening.
Swimming is happening, yes.
Had some event winners at the recent
Yeah.
recent swim meet. Yeah.
And there's three more. There's 3 more swim meets. Lacrosse has modified their schedule. I'll send it to the board. If you'll send the baseball schedule.
Okay.
And if you'll send the soccer schedule, that'd be great. And if anybody has track and field, I'd love to catch some of their stuff too.
Yeah.
And I will note that the partnership with the city and certainly the support of the board and having those additional athletic facilities, the fields, or what partially what's allowing us to have lacrosse and soccer and football and all these things that are kind of happening at the same time, field juggling, times of the year.
May we ask you one question? Is everything still on track for the June date of the LPS campus and the high school wing? Is everything still looking good?
That's what they tell me.
Okay.
The contractors believe they are on track, and that's
Okay.
the most important thing.
Burnett, did you have an announcement?
And as a reminder, since we're talking about fundraising and buildings, it's a great segue. Lakeland Education Foundation is still selling bricks. Plus little if you want to customize it. For a 4x8 brick, $200 plus a small fee if you want to customize it and add the Lions logo. A few 8x8 brick spaces left, but we have plenty of 4x8 brick spaces. I won soon because we're gonna have to close that out really soon to get them here in time for the construction.
Whole group of students that might be interested. The clubs or organizations.
Any other announcements? Hearing none, is there a motion to adjourn?
I'll move.
We have a motion, is there a second?
Second?
We have a motion and a second, all in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Let's close with this. Be strong, be brave, and toughen up. We're adjourned.
That's right.
That's it.